All right, so today we're going to be talking about CSV files, but particularly we're going to be talking about them as we can use them as a database. Now, I'm sure all of you may have at least heard that word before. What is a database? Or what
It's
is
a
a database?
collection of
Stores
Go
it's a
ahead.
data.
collection of data.
hmm Yeah. A database is the system for organizing and storing date information on a computer. Yeah. And generally, as we go forward, we're going to be using databases that are SQL databases, which we can query. But in preparation for that, we're going to be using a different type of database called a CSV file. And a CSV file is not the most efficient way to store data, but it is also probably the most common way to store data for business people. You can imagine, it's essentially akin to an Excel file. So there are much more efficient ways to store data, but CSV isn't going anywhere. It's the simplest way of just getting data onto a persistent form in a persistent form. So chances are wherever you work is going to have some legacy data all stored on CSVs, and you're going to have to learn how to work with it. So in most cases, databases, whether they're CSV or SQL or whatever, they're usually organized as tables or groups of tables. So usually it'll be something like, okay, a table will have an ID and some other stuff along with it that it keeps track of. Now, how many of you have used CSV files before? Outside of coding, that is.
I've used them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, how would you describe a CSV file?
Well, I'm pretty sure it stands for comma separated values.
Mm-hmm.
So I've exported Excel spreadsheets to CSVs
Yep.
because like Excel files and like CSVs and SQL, everything is input into a table. So CSVs are really versatile if you follow the table and row format.
Exactly. Very good. Yeah, so CSV does stand for comma separated values, and it's used to store that data. And it's essentially a plain text file that you can use to store data as a table. And each line of the file is a separate entry, and the value of each entry is separated by a comma, which kind of creates the columns. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate here a bit. So generally speaking, a CSV file is organized like this. So it'll often have headers, so not necessarily. So you could say column 1 name, column 2 name, which is all this is optional. Then I have entry 1, column 1, entry 1, column 2, entry 2, column 1, entry 2, column 2, and so on and so forth. So we're going to be using some data here. So I'm going to copy and paste something into this CSV file here, NFL Teams CSV. So you can see here my columns are ID, the team name, their wins, and their losses. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be interacting with this CSV file using Python's built-in CSV library. So I just have to say import CSV. And here's how it works. So I'd say with open, and then I have the name of the file, which in this case is nflteams.csv, as CSV file. So what this does is I'm opening up a connection to the CSV file. And I'm saying when I refer to CSV file like this, I'm referring to nflteams.csv. Then I'm going to say CSV reader is going to be a CSV dot reader. And I'm passing it in our CSV file. And then I'm going to loop through every row in CSV Reader and print out the row. So if I run CSV example here, it prints out each row as an array. So if I wanted to say, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Yeah, so each row is printed as an array. So if I wanted to print out just one row, I could say something like, actually, I don't have the ID number here. So I could say if row 0 equals 1, then I want to print out the row, and that would just print out the Patriots. Oh, oop. For example. I'm going to put it back the way it was. And another way to do that is if you don't want it to be an array of elements, you can also bring it back as an ordered dictionary. All you have to do that is instead of csv.reader, you'd use csv.dict reader. And the output instead will be what's called an ordered dictionary. So you can actually access each row by key value pairs, but it is also stored in order. Right. What questions do you have about CSV so far?
What would be the benefit of using Dict Reader over a reader? Or vice versa?
Yeah. So the benefit of Dict Reader is, since everything is a dictionary, you don't need to worry about index numbers. You can just say, give me the team of each row. So I could say print row team like this. You can really do that as a regular reader. The advantage of a regular, like you want to use a regular reader if you're not really super, if you're not particularly caring about that. So I put this back the way it is. And just say, I want to make sure that I have each row as a very simple to access form. Then this just makes sure that all of the data is just stored very simply and you can access it using index numbers. So essentially, the more you want to interact with it, using those key value pairs, Dict Reader is more helpful. In general, I would say Dict Reader is more useful, but they both work almost the same, except it's just the difference of how you want to print it out.
Thank you.
No problem.
Noah, if you wanted to find out the average number of wins or something like that, where you're actually analyzing the data in here, is CSV a good way to do that? Or is there some other way to take a CSV file and dig into the data?
I don't believe CSV has any built-in ways to help you do that. CSV, it's just essentially reading rows of plain text. So if you were interested in, doing things like calculating wins and losses and stuff like that, CSV would not be what you would want to use. Like CSV files, that is. And we'll get into more, flexible and more powerful databases next week. But yeah, so in this one, you'd probably have to do it the old-fashioned way of of grabbing every single value that you want and then calculating it. Tom, were you about to say something?
Oh no, just a lot of data is exported as CSVs, so the data will be stored in a CSV file, but you'd use other applications to actually analyze the data. That's where data science comes in, and Jupyter Notebook and PyCharm and all that stuff comes in.
Cool. And we're going to talk about some of those things, right?
No.
In this code. We're not talking about any of those in Code Platoon.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
We took it out of the curriculum about 2 cohorts ago.
Yeah, we found that it's like data science is such a big topic of interest and field that just giving 1 or 2 days to it was doing it a disservice. So we just took it out. It's better to, if that you're interested in that, just make it an entire field of study rather than just try to cover all of it in 2 days. Okay. Any other questions about CSV so far?
I'm getting a no such file directory error when I try to open the file, but it is in the same directory. Any tips on that?
Did you put it in as a string?
What do you mean?
As in, did you type it in like NFL teams.csv, or did you type it in like this?
Oh, no, yeah, we put it as a string. Yeah.
We can take it offline and debug it.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that I was thinking, you can always use // to just to specify in this folder, look for this. But I don't know if that will fix your particular problem either. Okay, so what we've been doing now is reading from a CSV file. The CSV library, however, has multiple modes that allow you to do different things beyond just reading. So I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to write to the CSV file now. So I'm going to say with open NFL teams.csv. And we'll call this as CSV file. And I'm going to create something called CSV writer is going to equal csv.writer with our CSV file. And I'm going to say CSV writer dot write row, and we'll add a row for the Giants. We'll say they're 6-4, and we'll add a row for the Lions, who are against all odds 8-2. So when we write this, we should see these 2 rows added to our NFL teams file, right? Uh-oh. Unsupported operation, not writable. Okay, so it looks like I did something wrong here. This should be the Giants, but that's not the problem.
If you say Lions are 8-2, it should return false. So.
Let's see here, but let's see what we see here. Okay, so it didn't change our CSV file, so it looks like, why is it not writable?
You have to pass the W and the open command.
Ah, yep, that's right. So in order to make this writing, I need to specify in the open mode equals W for write mode. Okay, no errors. If we take a look, well, that's not good, is it? What do you think happened here?
Yeah, I think you need to change W to A.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
W will rewrite the file every single time the program runs, but if you want to keep the old stuff,
yeah.
If you do A instead.
Yeah, exactly. W mode will rewrite the entire file. So if we change the mode to A, like so, and try it again, that looks a lot better. So if W will rewrite everything, A will append it, meaning it'll write it onto the end of what's already there. Also, I want to try something else. So I'm taking out that last line and then writing again. And looks what happens when I don't have that new line at the end, at the bottom of my file. The Jets are now 5-54, and the Giants are part of that apparently. So when you're working with a CSV file, you always want to make sure that there's an extra new line character at the bottom, so that the next thing will start on its own line. There is also another way of doing this, kind of similar to how we used a dict reader versus a reader. There's also a dict writer, which I think is better in general because it allows you to be more precise. So I could say, I'm going to create something here called field names. I'm going to say that the fields are ID, team, wins, and losses. And then I'm going to say, this is now a dict writer. Now we're passing it in the CSV file, and then we're also going to say the field names equals field names. So telling this new dictionary writer that these are the names of the fields. And then instead of passing it an array, I'm going to pass each right row an object, which allows me, again, to be more precise and I don't have to worry about order. So ID 4, team is now Giants, wins is now 6, and losses is 4. ID 5, team is the Lions, wins is 8, losses is 2. If I run the code again, uh-oh, invalid syntax. Ah, whoops. Try that again. Again. Oh, put a semicolon in there somehow. And here they are. So it does the exact same thing, but using the dictionary writer just allows me to specify, hey, here are all my keys, allows me to be more specific and gives me less chance to make weird mistakes beyond not putting my quotation marks and semicolons in the right place.
Hey, Noah, on the step a few steps ago when we overwrote the file, how did it get restored back to the original form?
Oh, I was just doing Command Z to undo.
Okay.
So that's just as simple as hitting the undo button. But in general, if you overwrite everything, it's not always that easy to fix. That is one advantage of CSV over like a SQL database, is you can't just undo on a SQL database.
When you're writing a row with the dictionary writer, what happens if you were to put in another key value pair that isn't previously described in field names?
Let's try it. So I'm going to, again, get rid of these rows, and let's say, just say town is now Detroit. Let's see if it lets us do that. So dict contains fields not in field names.
Okay, thank you.
So we pass in an array of field names up here to say, hey, here's the allowed fields. And I'm curious now if the regular writer will allow us to make that same mistake or not. So I'm just going to try this again. Mode equals A as CSV file, CSV writer, CSV.writer. I do CSV writer dot write row. And if I just pass it in, for Giants 6, 4, and New York. Let's see what happens now. Yeah, so that's another problem with the writer versus the dictionary writer, is that it just allowed me to add this new field here, which shouldn't really be allowed to happen if I want to make sure that this stays organized the way it's supposed to.
How did you fix the new line thing again to where the it wouldn't write on the same row at the end of the file again?
I mean, when I was looking like, oh, sorry, one sec. Let's try that again. When it was looking like this. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
So I just made sure that there was an empty line at the bottom for this to go into, and that fixes the problem.
Okay, so that's just, if we were working with real data, we would just go into the file and make sure the cursor's on the next line, resave it.
Yep. Well, it's not where the cursor is. It's making sure that there's an empty line at the bottom. So
Okay,
essentially a new line character.
I see. Could you also write just a new line and the CS is like the first row to, alleviate that problem? I mean, I guess you'd have spaces in your file, but.
And yeah,
or-
you can go in if it's a short enough CSV file and write things out by hand. But again, like the main thing is, just to avoid that error, is just making sure that there is a blank line at the bottom like that, so that there's essentially some place for the new lines to go, rather than at the very end of the last new line. Any other questions about CSV writing and reading? Okay. Well, in that case, let's talk about the challenges for today. So all of the challenges for today are going to be using CSV. So first we have word guess CSV here. So you're creating a word guessing game. You're given a words.csv file, which if we view the raw data here, you'll be able to see is huge. So you're going to be dealing with a lot of data in your CSV file for this one. And so you have like playing the game, you should be able to choose a difficulty level, and then you should be able to try to guess your word one letter at a time. And you win when you complete the word, you lose if you run out of guesses. So it's essentially Hangman without the hanged man part. And we can take a look, the requirements here. So it's got to get its words from words.csv. It doesn't look like it, but the CSV has 3 lines. The first entry on each line is the difficulty, and every other entry is a word for that difficulty. So the example, E difficulty, the first character is E, and then everything else on the line is easy words. And then you have M and H. So we take a look again at the data, go up to the very, very, very top. We can see here, here's medium, and these are all a bunch of medium words. And then somewhere down there is E and H as well.
So that CSV file does not have any headers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't have headers. So what you should be able to do is you should be able to read the CSV file and then select a random word from the appropriate difficulty. So if the user selects E, it should select a random easy word.
And the game is already built for you. You just have to extract the words from the CSV file and populate it into the instance variable self.words.
Yeah, so essentially we've got the easy mode here already made. So you're essentially moving self.words and replacing it with that data from the CSV file. You don't need to worry about the game logic. All right, what questions do you have about Word Guesser? All right, the next one is School Interface 1. So this is actually the first of several school interface challenges we're going to be doing over the course of this week. So we're going to be making a command line interface application to keep track of student records. So this tutorial, like this one, it's pretty, like, you really just have to follow it step by step. There isn't so much problem solving. This is pretty much just walking you through it in many ways. Some of them are a little bit vague, but to do your own research and debugging. But otherwise, this isn't so much about problem solving. This is about learning how to make your own command line interface application. And this is also going to be dealing with the kind of intersection between using a database and using object-oriented programming. So you'll start out with 2 Python files and a data folder for CSV files. So the runner file, there's also a runner file. So you're going to be creating classes for school, students, and staff. And the staff and students have things like name, ages, passwords, roles, and IDs. And your goal here is that you want to refactor everything so that it all makes sense. And then you'll be, it's got a whole thing in here. I don't want to get too deep into it. So it's going to be a big thing about object-oriented programming and a lot about CSV as well. So first, refactoring your object-oriented programming, and then using it to, sorry. Okay, no sneezing. And then loading the data into a CSV file. There we go.
Bless you. Also, they talk about inheritance in this with creating a person class. We're going to cover inheritance tomorrow, but there is some documentation that we link to guide you kind of through it today.
Yep.
As well. It's not 100% necessary to complete this challenge, but we do advise trying to work through inheritance.
And then lastly, we've got bowling. So you're going to be writing a program to simulate a game of bowling. So you should be able to run an instance of a game class and have it return an array of bowling scores, a final total score, and a game of bowling. So we have the rules of bowling here for you. You're going to have to do things like dealing with spares and strikes. So this is a object-oriented exercise focusing on form. So it's not just about making your project work, but about focusing on a step-by-step TDD approach. So we've got 3 basic steps for you here, but everything else is left pretty vague. So you're going to be creating a frame class, a player class, and a game class. And it's up to you to figure out how those classes interact with one another and how they can all work together into a bowling game. So
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say it's hard because you have to know like how to score up.
Yeah, bowling scores are confusing.
Strikes and spares and
yeah. So this is going to be a toughie. Any questions about the challenges for today? All right. Today is a pair programming day. So take a break and then, take a 10, 15-minute break. And then we'll Slack out the pairs for today and get you into the breakout rooms.